Oh, I'm Andy Schmuckler. I'm doing videos in a series I call A Better Human Story, promising that there's an integrated way of understanding the forces at work in the human world that could do us good to incorporate into how we see things. If it had been in place, I've been claiming lately, in liberal America with a secular worldview for the past generation, this fascist force would have been killed in the cradle. But it wasn't recognized and it wasn't fought, and it was let loose to continue to develop power over the course of 30 whatever years, and now we've elected essentially a fascistic leader of a fascistic party. So I'm in the process of trying to provide little pieces of this integrated vision. There are a lot of pieces, and one of them I developed in the previous video about the reality of value and that registering in the experiential realm of creatures that evolve to experience some things as better and some things as worse. And once that happens, value becomes real. And it's important because it's being selected for as a matter of life or death. Having those experiential tendencies, that evaluative system built inside us of a better and worse, has been correlated with motivating our ancestors to do what's required to get their DNA into the future. That's why we've been selected to have the nature that we have. There's not nothing inside us, far from it. Before we were civilized, we had ancestors that were swimming. It goes all the way back, and an experiential realm starts emerging long before, and we've got a lot inside of us, and one of them is that there's some experiences that we feel we experience as better, and some that we experience as worse, and so the people who wrote the Declaration of Independence attributed to us that we are engaged in a pursuit of happiness. And the pursuit of happiness means getting the kinds of experiences that were associated with our ancestors surviving. Well, in that respect, the same is true of what we could call the spiritual dimension. They're similar in that way, but they're different in another way, because whereas value, the better and the worse, has got to do with, I don't know, in a sense, I actually haven't thought this through, but I sort of experience it as a spectrum that runs from better to worse, whereas with spiritual, there is embedded in our DNA, one infers from the ethnographic data, a capacity to have a special kind of experience that is deeper, feels more real, more vivid, more impactful. One can talk about a dimension that you can find that people throughout history and in pretty much every community, and maybe in a rather large number of individual lives, there are breakthroughs into something that feels like, oh, now I really got what's true, and it's really true, and it's really important, and people have these kinds of experience that I would call spiritually transformative. And whatever you want to think about them and hold that in abeyance, it is a reality that this is part of what our experiential tendencies include, because every place you look in the whole encyclopedia of seeing the human world tells you that there is that dimension of experience, and it's very impactful. In fact, sometimes an experience like that changes the whole direction of a life, and I've had that experience. That idea did that for me in 1970. So that is a reality. Why we've got that capacity, well, that's something to look into, and we can look into it by saying, what can we infer from the fact that it has been established in the human genome Whether every individual has that or not, I don't know. Um, it's in the human genome to have that dimension of experience where you can get down to the spiritually uh, profound level where things seem not just uh, good, say, but we've broken down into a level where the sacredness of them is experienced as such. And it's built into us. I think anthropologists of religion would agree that the idea of the sacred is kind of a human universal. And when we see these human universals, we can infer that something's been selected for. Um, and it's being selected for necessarily means that those of our ancestors who had that experiential tendency were more likely to get their DNA into the future than those that didn't. So we can infer from the fact that it's a human universal that it was beneficial for the survival of our ancestors to have at least some people who would go into that dimension and come back with whatever it was they came back with. Or maybe it was the whole society did, because societies over through history and through prehistory too have taken experiences of that sort of fundamental level where you think this is the sacred, and they have enshrined them as sort of guideposts or sacred texts or what points toward the way to live. And so I think that we can infer, first of all, that evolution shows it's part of our genome, which makes it real enough for me. I mean, what would be more real than it's just something that evolution, the process of selection, inscribed on the nature of the creature? So it's real. And the way we treat it tells me that it tells us that it must be important, because people build their cultures around some of this stuff, and people build their individual lives around some of this stuff. So it must be important. And it wouldn't be in us if it hadn't been the case that people who had those very impactful, spiritually transformative experiences were more likely to do what life survival required than people who didn't have it. So it's life serving. QED, the spiritual dimension, is real, important, and life serving. And the more people of a secular worldview are therefore allowed back into, in some fashion, the precincts of spiritual experience that they take seriously. And they don't treat it as a second class kind of a thing, like has been, I think, generally true in liberal America. No, it's a source. It has been, as we have evolved, that dimension of experience has been worth paying attention to, worth treating as a source of important guidance. So if we take more seriously the moral and the spiritual dimensions of our human reality that evolved as part of our nature, we'll be more likely to fight a force of brokenness like has taken over conservative America over the past generation, with all too weak a response from liberal America with its work in progress secular worldview. I'm trying to provide additional things that you can get that for the secular worldview. By applying an evolutionary perspective, you can discover that certain things that have been dismissed as subjective or whatever are in fact real, important, and life-serving. Thank you. Subscribe if you would, and if you want to see, some places where I've sort of put all these individual pieces together, laying it out as systematically as I can, please go to my website, abetterhumanstory.org. Thank you for your attention. If you're there,